Julia, and thank you to our 5 amazing speakers who are here today to share more about their open source tools. First on our speaker roster is Denny Murray. So Denny, if you could just introduce yourself quickly and say, mention your affiliation and go ahead and share your screen.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a PhD student at the University of New Hampshire. And I'm just going to share this. And is that the correct view for everybody?
Yeah, it looks good.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to be speaking with you today about the critical zone biogeochemistry and hydrology data pipeline. This is part of my dissertation research at the University of New Hampshire. And it's also in collaboration with the CUAHSI Hydroinformatics Fellowship. Before I get started, I just want to acknowledge the support of my advisor, Adam Wymore, as well as collaborators Laurel Larson at UC Berkeley and Michelle Newcomer at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. So the critical zone data pipeline is centered around synthesizing time series data from different spheres across the critical zone. And the critical zone can be thought of as the Earth's thin skin that sustains light spanning from atmosphere to bedrock. The critical zone is complex. It encompasses many interacting processes across space and time, from meteorology and wet deposition to aerosol chemistry, soil properties, and geology. And each of these attributes are measured by federal agencies like NASA, NOAA, USGS at different spatial and temporal intervals, be it point or gridded measurements from 15 minutes to annual scales. And these agencies disseminate data products on public repositories, but often they're in formats that are not completely compatible with one another, making it difficult to synchronize data sets and ask research questions regarding multi-scale processes across the critical zone. Previous efforts have recognized the need for a unifying platform for extracting time series data from each data platform, but many existing data products approach synthesis efforts using a bottom-up approach. And what I mean by that is when you're faced with merging multiple data layers, each added layer can result in a loss of data dependent on the previous layer's spatial and temporal extent. So with a bottom-up approach, so starting with terrestrial attributes and working our way up to atmospheric attributes, often the resolution from layers at the top of the critical zone can be the most filtered and least preserved. And this is a challenge that many of us face when we're choosing how to integrate time series and observations across scales. I've constructed the critical zone data pipeline using a top-down approach. So that is that atmospheric deposition chemistry and meteorology are the primary data aggregation variables, preserving the most data at this scale. So the critical zone data pipeline synchronizes 4 major types of data: wet deposition inputs, and this is sourced from the National Atmospheric Deposition Program; daily meteorology, so data like precipitation, solar radiation, air temperature from the DAMET 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer gridded product; watershed exports of various elements and associated discharge from the USGS; and landscape attributes like phenology, albedo, and vegetation variables from both NASA and USGS. The pipeline accesses each public data repository, extracts relevant variables, and then pairs data based on geocoordinates and time series overlap. Data products can be used to answer research questions regarding the exchange, connectivity, and drivers of water and elements across the critical zone. So the data pipeline and associated products are being constructed using Python language and will be disseminated through a series of Jupyter notebooks on both GitHub and HydroShare, which was mentioned earlier. The idea is that this platform will allow for consistent updating of the pipeline as different data sources can be incorporated over time. So I'm just going to walk you through my workflow for creating the data pipeline. So as I mentioned earlier, we use deposition chemistry as the primary aggregation variable. So we pull in our wet deposition chemistry and site information from the NADP. We then layer on the daily meteorological data, and this is imported for each gridded location that overlaps with an NADP site. And then the pipeline hindcasts the meteorological conditions for when deposition fell. And this is an important point to make because the NADP and a lot of other data collection agencies who focus on wet deposition collect data on a composite sample. So they put samplers out for a week at a time and then collect the only other meteorological data that's associated with the chemistry is the precipitation volume. So we don't have things like air temperature, solar radiation, or these other potentially important variables. So the pipeline time passed the meteorological conditions for that interval when the deposition fell. And this is on a daily scale. And from here, we're using a temperature 50 threshold from a previous study to assign a rain or snow custom temperature threshold to then write a function that calculates whether that wet deposition fell as rain or snow. The result in the data product for the deposition and meteorology data product contained over 4 million meteorological data points and over 400,000 deposition chemistry data from about 381 sites spanning 0 to 40 years at a weekly scale, as indicated by the color gradient on the top graph, which are all the different sites with different site operation lengths. The plot with the gradient of circle sizes reflects the annual percent of deposition that falls as snow, with colors corresponding to different ecoregions. So calculation of precipitation phase is a unique attribute of this data pipeline, as this type of metric is not collected alongside chemistry data. And we demonstrate the importance of this calculation by using the pipeline to ask a research question like, how does precipitation phase influence deposition chemistry? It's well known in the atmospheric chemistry literature that rain and snow have different ion scavenging potential due to snow having increased surface area and ability to scavenge heavier ions. And when we use the data pipeline to subset all of our deposition chemistry and meteorology data into 3 precipitation categories, that is rain, mixed, and snow, as can be seen on the x-axis of the bar plot on the page, we can see that there's a significant difference in each precipitation phase's ability to scavenge nitrate deposition relative to ammonium, which is the ratio that's displayed on the y-axis. And we can further subset our data product into ecoregions and perform the same analysis, preserving very large sample sizes. And we can see that the same pattern holds across multiple ecoregions in the US. And this finding is important to consider in light of climate change, which is leading to warmer winters and less precipitation falling in snow in northern latitudes, which could potentially influence the annual load of nitrate to watersheds. Currently, this type of time passing approach is the only way to associate wet deposition chemistry and precipitation phase, because many of the NADP sites do not have co-located weather stations. And so we provide this type of calculation within our data pipeline. And there's many other applications that this type of function can be used for. So the second phase of the data pipeline pairs our wet deposition chemistry with USGS river chemistry and discharge time series. So sites were spatially paired by whether they fell within the same HUC-10 watershed boundary. And as noted by the dashed boxes around some of these functions, this part of the pipeline is customizable. I chose the HUC-10 level because it was a sort of intermediate watershed size, but depending on the research question that a user has, they can aggregate deposition and river chemistry sites by a different HUC level. From the matched wet deposition and river monitoring sites, we extract the water quality time series data, and then chemistry observations are paired based on sampling date overlaps. So this results in a data product that contains paired deposition and river chemistry from 119 locations that are between 0 and 30 kilometers apart, but are still within that same HUC-10 level. It has watershed areas spanning 300 to 4,000 kilometers squared, with a range of 50 to 1,500 paired chemistry observations. And the overlapping chemistry variables include anions and cations, as well as pH and specific conductance. So with this data set, there are some really interesting questions that we can ask. One question that I'm particularly interested in applying this data pipeline to is understanding the degree to which deposition inputs imprint on watershed exports. This is a question that the biogeochemistry field has grappled with for many years. For example, we know that acid rain can influence stream water quality, but we actually lack some long-term spatially comprehensive records of paired deposition and stream chemistry across different watershed sizes and land use and land history gradients. And so we haven't really been able to explore the synchrony between these two major pools of ions in the critical zone across a very large spatial distribution. So just to demonstrate how our data pipeline could be used, we're quantifying the synchrony between deposition and river time series using information theory, which is a probability-based metric for assessing the reduction in uncertainty that deposition time series can provide to river time series. The chord diagram here just shows the degree to which deposition influences river chemistry, which is up to 45%. And this is a causal-based method, so then we can take our statistical model and create this into a conceptual model of a watershed. So the final phase of the data pipeline is to extract landscape attributes from NASA and USGS, and then ultimately merge all data products into a final data product. But I'm still in progress of finishing this step of the pipeline. We hope for this data pipeline to be available to the public by next summer, and think that these could be used for many researchers and managers interested in synchronized time series data. And if you want to learn more and you'll be at AGU in Chicago, please come visit my poster. We can chat more about it, or I'm happy to take questions at the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Denny. Next up, we have Mike. Mike, if you want to just briefly introduce yourself and share your screen.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Mike Blah. I'm a data scientist from Duke University and Emily Bernhardt's lab. I'm going to stop my video for this to preserve bandwidth over here in rural Montana. Okay. The Stream Pulse project is a collection of projects. It's a community of researchers. It's also a web data sharing platform. And it all came about because of the advent of high-resolution in-stream dissolved oxygen sensors, which revolutionized our ability to model the productivity and the respiration of all the organisms in a stream reach. In other words, to model stream metabolism, which is kind of a fundamental vital sign of the health of a stream and of an indicator of the type of stream ecosystem that you're dealing with. So in the same way that we have forests and deserts and terrestrial ecosystems, we also have stream ecosystems, and we're beginning to learn how to characterize these using this kind of an approach. So today I'm talking about the component of Stream Pulse that is open source tools on the web. And your starting place for that is streampulse.org, where you can learn about the history of this approach, how the modern approach to modeling metabolism works, whether your particular stream reach of interest might be amenable to this approach, and if so, how you could go about setting up a sensor array in your own stream to do this thing yourself. You can either just use data that other people have provided to this system, input data and metabolism model outputs, or you can head to the upload tab and get your own data into the system. That's pretty straightforward in terms of just clicking a button to decide what kind of data you're uploading, navigate to the file. We show you how to format it, or in several cases, you can just upload a logger file directly and we know how it's formatted. And then you're asked to simply match your variable names to the official variable names within the system. Also, during this process, you're asked whether you'd like to embargo your data, meaning for up to 5 years, your data can be totally private and only accessible to you, but all of the data within Stream Pulse eventually become public. Also, during upload, you are asked to clean your data, which is extremely important because metabolism modeling under the hood is done by an R package connected to a STAN modeling framework. So this is Bayesian, and it uses daily pooling, which means if you have a single day with bad data in an otherwise totally pristine site year of perfect records, the bad data will pollute the rest of your days of model estimates. So we've put a lot of effort into making it very easy to clean stream metabolism input data. You can simply drag across visual time series from your uploaded file and select series of points that have issues or individual points. And you can flag them as either interesting, like there was a storm on this day, or questionable or bad data. And if bad, we will just remove those from your file before inserting it into the Stream Pulse database. This is actually one of the primary reasons that a lot of people use this whole ecosystem. People really like this tool. It also has a built-in outlier detector that's supposed to aid with the flagging process. It is by no means infallible, so do not rely on it, but it can be helpful for identifying points that need to be flagged. So once your data are in the system, you can do things like compare your sensor variables to each other. You can overlay grab sample data on sensor data. You can look at a single site year relative to the interquartile range of that same variable from all the previous site years. And you can do this for your sites and for all the public data within this system. But eventually, you're ready to model metabolism. And we have attempted to help with that too. Like I said, there's a package called Stream Metabolizer that was developed by the USGS, specifically Allison Appling and a bunch of other folks. But that is the preeminent modeling framework for metabolism. We have just built another package called StreamPulse on top of that helps with a few things, namely requesting your data from the StreamPulse portal into a local R instance, preparing your data for metabolism modeling. So this would mean filtering out certain samples or filling gaps or reshaping. And if you happen to be lucky and your stream is one of the straightforward ones, it might be possible to just fit metabolism directly using the StreamPulse package. By straightforward, I mean, if you have a significant amount of productivity in your stream and it's not high gradient and fast flowing, and if you have a really strong diel oxygen cycle, then you can probably just fit metabolism simply like this. And your entire run could just be these 3 calls. If not, you'll have to interact with the Stream Metabolizer package directly. In any case, though, you will end up with some diagnostic plots that help you determine whether your model fit is a good one and whether it's worth drawing inference from it. So this is what the Stream Pulse package's diagnostic plots look like. And there's information on the website about how to interpret these. But basically, at the end of the run, you'll be asked, would you like to contribute these model results to the StreamPulse portal? And if you say yes, in your R console, your model results will just be automatically uploaded to the portal, and you can visualize them alongside everyone else's. So this is a stream called Black Earth Creek in Wisconsin from the year 2017. And this is what some really pretty metabolism outputs can look like. So here we have gross primary productivity in red, peaking in the summertime, respiration in blue, peaking shortly after. You can visualize all of your input data in this bottom panel, and you can see a kernel density plot of respiration and productivity overall on the right. You can also view that kernel density as it changes over time relative to all of the corpus of StreamPulse data. And of course, you can download everything that might be relevant to you directly from the portal if you don't want to interact with R. So I still have this upcoming features slide that hasn't changed for quite some time, if I'm being honest. I might not get to some of these in the context of StreamPulse because StreamPulse has sort of been spiritually superseded by another project. StreamPulse reached its end of funding last year, and this new project is kind of focused on watershed summary data, data levels and revision tracking, and some of these other things. The new project is called MacroSheds, and this is also led by Emily Bernhardt at Duke University, along with Matt Ross at Colorado State University. And this is sort of similar to what Denny was describing, but it's focused on small watersheds. It is born of the fact that there are hundreds of long-term monitoring efforts from small watersheds throughout the world, possibly thousands of individual sites with years to decades of very meticulous monitoring of chemistry and stream flow, and often precipitation and precip chemistry too. So I'm talking about like the LTER network and the critical zone observatories, and the U.S. Forest Service manages a lot of these sites. The Department of Energy funds a lot of these. Now we have the NEON network, and there are many, many more throughout the world, but they've never really been harmonized into a single data set. So that's what this is. It's been in the works for a couple of years now, and it will be public and published very soon. It's a data set and a portal that has so far amassed 200 sites and something like 90 million records of chemistry and stream flow and precip, coupled with comprehensive watershed summary statistics for each of these sites. So terrain and vegetation, soil and bedrock, climate, and land use, and everything you can think of for conducting the kind of research that is that was proposed by the watershed ecosystem concept way back in the day. In small watersheds, it's actually possible to talk coherently about inputs and outputs in terms of just the processing that happens within the watershed that is all kind of detectable. So you can construct meaningful budgets in watersheds like these, and you can talk about weathering rates, and so on. And because of this project, it'll be possible to do that at a continental scale. And this project will be growing for years to come. These are the acknowledgements for just the Stream Pulse project, which was headed by several PIs, primarily Emily Bernhardt. Lots of other folks helped with that too. Both of these, by the way, are licensed under MIT. We definitely welcome contributions of any kind. The MacroSheds project's data will be primarily under CC BY, so attribution required. Otherwise, a lot of it's public domain. There are a few sites in MacroSheds that will have more restrictive licenses, but that's all explained in the data use agreement. And these are the current sites within StreamPulse. Thank you much.
All right, thank you so much. And actually, Matt Ross will be here next week to talk more about MacroSheds, if anyone wants to hear more about it. So next up, we have Luis, if you want to just share your screen and give yourself a brief introduction.
Okay, let me just share my screen here. See. Okay, share screen and share some. Okay, is my screen okay? Okay, good.
Yeah,
okay.
It looks good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, hi everyone. So I'm going to present swimming through open water models for sustainable futures. And my name is Luis Garnica. I'm a full research associate at the University of Texas at El Paso. And this is some of the people in my team. We are composed by computer scientists, researchers in science, in geology, in anthropology, and also we have a bunch of contributors that specialized in water. So let's get right to it. Okay, first, the motivation for this small talk is about talking about water modeling. So in this case, models sometimes are not designed to be integrated with other models. And sometimes they are done in a way that you need a specific operating environment and a specialist software to run them. So by this, I mean that maybe some of the models that we create to look at a certain system, we need to even pay for the licenses to use that software, or we can only run it on our machines, or even on a cluster at the local computer site, or things like that. So it's not really accessible to all of the other stakeholders. And the other issue is about data. So we also have this big challenge when it comes to interoperability, because sometimes the data comes into different formats, it's created for different purposes, and it also comes from decoupled sources. So even when we actually address these specific problems, then comes the next one, right? About reproducibility. So we already published our results, but just to reproduce it, it may require a steep learning curve just to set everything up. It may require some coding skills. And also a big issue that we have all of the time is that there's always limited documentation. So then the next part is that even if we figure this part out, what about the participatory modeling? So participatory modeling is something that is not really fully adopted outside of the scientific community. And by this, I mean that sometimes when we're doing all of the modeling process, we don't bring in stakeholders from the beginning. So it's a good idea to bring in all of the other stakeholders, even if they're not water domain experts, so that they can start interacting with the products that we're generating for them. Because ultimately, it's all about stakeholder engagement. So all of the science that we make, the plan is to make this translational science. And by this, I mean that the science can be used in the actual real world. So in order to address all of these issues, we decided to come up with this one open-based modeling interface, where we create one interface for a bunch of different models, data, and a bunch of tools so that we can help users and stakeholders interact with the models themselves. So this tool is called Sustainable Water Through Integrated Modeling. And as you can see in this diagram, we have data and metadata going into the model. So we have a specific schema by which all of the models are adapted to. We have heterogeneous models that have been developed in different tools. We develop tools so that we can interpret the results better with visualizations and even creation of automatic narratives. And then we also provide some extra tools for bringing output recommendations for specific types of stakeholders. And once we have all of this information into the system, we also want the creators of those specific scenarios or models to be shared in an open platform. And in this case, we have integrated with the HydroShare platform. So just to give a brief timeline on where we started and where we're going through. So with this slide, it has a really nice title, Swimming Towards Generalization and Open Source. So we kind of first started, okay, we have this specific hydroeconomic model that it's been generated for the region. In our case, is the El Paso area. It also covers part of Mexico and New Mexico. So we created this big model, but we wanted to share it with stakeholders and give them access to interact with the model. So this was very specific. So we created a user interface where they can access this model. And some of that is already on GitHub. But then as we move along, we started to generalize the system a bit more. So bringing another model in, and then we created another model, which is the water balance model. So it's more of a simulation of the region. And from finding the commonalities between these different models that are so heterogeneous, that we decided, okay, let's create one single interface for all of the models that we're going to integrate. So that we don't have to personalize an interface for each of the models that we create. So that's when we came up with Swim. So the interface itself, it will be available on GitHub soon, all of the source code. But for now, we're still working on a lot of the backend. So the backend, we have decoupled the system and it's compatible with Docker so that the environment can pretty much set up itself. And then we decided to integrate another version of the model. So things move along, the research moves further. So we need to bring in new versions into the system. And then right now we are in the process of chaining the model. So we have different models into the system. What if we make them talk with each other? So we can have an output of one model be an input to the model, another model. So, and that's how it moves on. And then the vision of the system itself, when we move to the next phase, is that, okay, we have now a unified system to bring in water models, but what about other models? So the vision is to have a unified general model interface with new collaborations and new models. So now I'm going to show a demo for the rest of the presentation so that you can see everything in action. And here it goes.
First, we need to open up a browser. In this case, I have opened Google Chrome. And then I'm going to type in the URL, pool.org/swim. And this will redirect us to the project website. After the website has loaded, we need to allow for the use of cookies. There will be a pop-up on the right-hand corner where we're going to click on Allow. And if we want more information about how cookies are used on the websites, we just need to click on the Learn More button. So for now, I'm going to click on Allow. And then next, I'm going to sign into my account. So once I'm signed in, we're going to go into the model section. And currently, we have two regional water models integrating into the interface. One of the models simulates a regional water balance and projects into the future according to the established operating rules of the system. The other model optimizes the water balance to maximize the regional economic profits derived from the water usage. As an example, we will create and run a model scenario with the water balance simulation model. After clicking on the model, we are shown a landing page with conceptual diagrams and a summary of the model. Then, by clicking on the Create Scenario, we are taken to the personalization workflow. The workflow is divided into 3 steps: scenario selection, run model, and view result. Optionally, we can change the time range of the simulation. We can look at the area of coverage for this specific model. And we also have transparent access to the input catalog with all of the parameters and values that are going into the model. To keep the demo short, I will only choose a combination of predefined scenarios. In this case, I can choose an extreme stress climate scenario combined with an operation rule where we keep the main reservoir at least at 20% of maximum capacity. Each box contains a description and data source for the scenario, and each scenario can affect one or many parameter values. If we click on Learn More, we can see the parameters that are affected for the specific scenario that we selected. Once we have selected the scenario combination of choice, we can click either here on Run Model button or we can click directly on the step. So if I click on the step, I need to add some information about my custom scenario. In this case, I'm going to make it a private scenario, which means it will be accessible only from my account. Once the execution is done, the workflow will automatically move to the View Scenarios results steps. Here we have two different screens, the summary screen and the output catalog. On the summary screen, we can see some aggregated results of the overall simulation. If we go into the output catalog, we can browse individual output generated from the simulation. In this case, we can select one or many outputs and look at the results side by side. The output detail screen gives us some metadata and different types of data visualizations. Additionally, we can go down and have some data tools where we can change the units of the values that we're looking at. And we can also combine into the same plot other output or inputs that have the same types of units. Since we made this execution private, all of the simulations that we generated on our account will be available on the My Scenario section. Here, my next step is that I want to share some of my scenarios on the HydroShare platform. To do so, I'm going to go on the HydroShare column, and then I'm going to select one of the scenarios that I want to share. So before we can share on HydroShare, first we need to sign into my account on the HydroShare website. Then, once I'm signed in, I will authorize Swim to have access into my account. Once the authentication is validated, if I click on Share again, now I'm taken to a form where I can fill out some metadata before sending the resource to HydroShare. So just to keep it simple, I'm just going to add a few keywords. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a resource. Once the resource is created in HydroShare, I will get a link from HydroShare, which I can click on, and look at the HydroShare resource directly. I can edit this and add additional metadata. But for now, I'm going to just open with, and we can go ahead and look at the results back directly into Swim.
All right, so that was the quick demo of the platform. And just to finish up here, some of the acknowledgements that this project was supported by NSF, and also the first version of the project was supported by the USDA. We have a lot of our students here, and of course, we want to say thank you for the people from CUAHSI, and special thanks to Clara and Scott Black. They were the ones that have been helping us out with the integration to HydroShare. So that's it. And here's a quick QR code in case you want to go into the website and take the first tutorial and give us some feedback. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Closing us out is James Hallgren and Arpita Patel. You guys just want to introduce yourselves quickly. We're looking forward to your talk.
There, my microphone is on. Thank you. My name is James Hallgren, and my colleague Arpita Patel and I work for the University of Alabama in the new Cooperative Institute for Research Operations in Hydrology. And we're going to tell you a little bit about a lot of things that share some connection to what Luce just presented. A deployable Jupyter infrastructure that we're sharing with all kinds of people, and our purpose with it has to do with the National Water Model, but we're focusing on the actual infrastructure. Just a tiny shameless plug for the Cooperative Institute. We've recently started April 4th of this year was when we officially kicked off, and we all of these institutions are involved in that. And of course, we acknowledge the support of the National Weather Service and NOAA for providing the funding for our institute. If you're interested in coming and working where you can see me here in the background, in a wonderful and pleasant Alabama fall, then please get in touch with us. The National Water Model, many of you are familiar with it, has presented us with an interesting data challenge. It generates approximately 1 terabyte of operational output daily, and the retrospective simulations are about 100 terabytes for each new model instance. Dealing with that size of data, and then the format, of course, the model itself produces that data in a format that's consistent with the modeling, but not necessarily very effective for queries or any sort of analysis. And so there's an orthogonality in the way that they're produced versus how they're queried. A lot of these data are hosted by the big data providers. AWS and Google Cloud have most of the data sets, and there's actually a recent a pretty exciting discussion about hosting some of the outputs on the Google BigQuery platform. But up to now, it's been a fairly difficult thing to access all of those data sets. And if you see the GitHub link here, the GitHub link takes you to a GitHub issue where we started to walk through some of the things that we wanted to explore with that. And of course, this is a problem that's not just for the Cooperative Institute. The Cooperative Institute is supporting National Water Model, and people in the whole ecosystem associated with the National Water Model have been dealing with this. So we found a group called 2I2C. 2I2C sprang from the Pangeo group and is organized with the goal of providing federated computing services to a lot of different people, and they provide Jupyter hubs deployed through Kubernetes, and a key piece of what they do is deploy all these with the right to replicate, and which is to say that we're allowed to share the infrastructure that we get from them. And so what we're going to walk through the rest of this talk is a Jupyter Hub infrastructure that, if you would be interested in setting it up in a similar way to the way that we have to access in this case, Google Cloud stores of the National Water Model data, then all of the code is in the open, and we welcome your interest, and you'd be welcome to copy our Git repository, and we're going to walk through how that gets used. It's so this is a computer science focused talk, which is why Arpita Patel will take over in just a moment here. I'll explain just a tiny bit more. The Jupyter Hub is all of you are familiar with Jupyter Hub probably, but just as a summary, it's a data science environment that sits in the cloud, and the goal of the 2I2C deployment of it is to put the data computational capability right next to the data. And so what we've done is encapsulated that capability, and if you wanted to deploy it inside of your own architecture next to your own data, then you could take advantage of this this hub architecture that we're going to share here in just a moment. So again, a summary. The goal is to create this data hub in the cloud next to some of the data from the National Water Model. We're using it for our own purposes to address the volume problem by co-locating next to the data, and we're also now with that portal trying to figure out some of the formatting challenges. That's how we're using the data, or using the portal. You might use it in lots of other ways. So I'll turn it over to Arpita to walk through some of the capabilities and just exactly how this thing is used on the back end.
Hello, everyone. Myself, Arpita Patel. I'm a DevOps manager here at Alabama Water Institute, working at University of Alabama. So I'll be presenting the two environments that we have on 2I2C right now. One of them is the staging environment. It's a web portal. We just have to log into the environment. We can choose currently the image that is deployed in this environment that's the image repo, which is on the slide right now. That's the image deployed in both staging and production environment right now. It's all open source. We use GitHub, and the instances get created on the GCP cloud. So what happens when you log into the environment, it asks you for the server options. You want to select a small, medium, large, or a huge based on the RAM or CPU needs that you have. Going next on the next slide. So once you log into this environment, what you'll find is you have the capability to open a Jupyter notebook. You'll run the Python code there. You'll also have the option is to have the terminal where you can run any kind of the Linux commands here. So the idea is the national water model that is there on GCP, the data that is there on GCP right now, we have a compute next to it. So it's close to data. Going to the next slide. 2I2C also provides us the admin support. So anyone who is an admin on this system, they can have access to who all is logged in right now from their institute, and they can see, like, they can even stop the servers from here. They have access to everything from admin portal. Going to the next slide. So these are the latest technologies that 2I2C is using right now. They're using the Docker to containerize any the image, Kubernetes to clusterize the cloud, and they also use the Helm charts to deploy the containers using the package installations. And they use the Terraform, which is an infrastructure as a code that we can use and deploy to any of the cloud system or to the on-premise infrastructure. So they have access to create an instance on Google Cloud, Azure, Amazon EC2, and they also provide the storage ability. They have object storage as well as they provide the cloud storage, which is really good. And they provide the domain registration. So anyone who is interested in creating their own domain, they provide the access to their own hub using that domain. So I'll walk you through some of the continuous integration and continuous deployment model that we use right now with 2I2C here. It's very simple. We just go to their GitHub repo. We create a ticket for any of the new changes that we need to make to the image. That creates a new branch automatically. And once we make the changes to that branch, it will go and submit we can go and submit a pull request, which gets merged to the main branch, and it automatically will trigger the actions, GitHub actions that will build and push the image to the repository that they have in place. So that's the continuous integration that we can make any simple change and we can test it out without breaking anything else in the code. And the deployment side, deployment side, we can deploy to staging environment, or once it's verified, we can deploy to production environment. Going to the next slide, I'll just show you the quick demo on the same steps what I discussed just now. This is the continuous integration flow. We create a ticket, we create a ticket here, we can give options, and then we have an option to create a branch automatically from here. So once it comes down, create a new branch, it will create a branch. And we can make changes to this branch, and once it's done, we can create a pull request to merge the code in. So the pull request and merge, confirm merge. And once it's merged, it will automatically trigger the action, and action will build the image and push it to the CUAHSI that they have as a repository. So the latest image is always available at CUAHSI. And so this is the continuous integration flow that we have right now in place at 2I2C. And next slide, we can look at how we are deploying it. It's very simple. Go to GitHub repo, go to actions, find the latest image that is currently built. From here, we take the image ID and just go to their 2I2C hub. They give admin access where we just change the image ID and hit submit. So that will deploy our code in staging environment. And once it's verified, we can do the same thing on production environment and deploy very easily. So yeah, that's some of the things that we have in place right now at AWI here. Go to next slide. Yeah, so here are some of the references. So the first one is for the hub image. This is the URL for that, if anyone interested in looking into it. And they also provide a detailed service guide and infrastructure guide. And if anyone is interested in logging to this portal, let us know. We can provide an access to them. So here is our email for that. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. We will now begin the moderated question period, and we already have one question in the chat. So the first question I'm seeing, and all participants should feel free to use the Q&A function. For Luis, can you further explain the possibilities for model integration outside of those that already exist on the platform?
Okay, right. So right now on the platform, we have services that support making models in Python, in GAMS, the General Algebraic Modeling Framework, and also in Scilab, which is kind of an open source tool similar to MATLAB. So if you're making a model in any of those tools, we will publish a set of guidelines on how to set up your input requirements, but the rest of the model can be coded ad hoc. So once you have a model in any of these different platforms, we are going to be making available instructions and all of the different services so that you can use the platform to integrate your models. And on top of that, another effort that we're working on is to automate part of the integration process in the form of APIs. So a lot of it's still done programmatically on some of the configurations, but the plan is to automate that process as well.
All right, we have a question for Denny next. Did I understand correctly that your tool covers all aspects of the critical zone, not just the hydrosphere for the entire CONUS? Could this tool be useful for Earth system models or other research avenues this audience is interested in?
Yeah, thanks for that question. At the moment, I would say that the tool does focus on attributes from the hydrosphere coupled with the chemistry that's sort of tied with water movement. So deposition chemistry, meteorology, watershed chemistry, discharge, and then the terrestrial attributes, which will largely be focused on phenology and evapotranspiration. And so that sort of answers the first part of that question. The second part of the question for Earth system models. So I'm not going to, there's so many applications that I think that the data products pipeline can be used for. The original intention for the pipeline was actually for time series analyses. But I think that depending on the type of Earth system model that you're using, that there's attributes within the critical zone pipeline that could be pulled out and input into an Earth system model.
All right, thank you. We have another one for Luis. Can you use your model platform for other geographies, say California or the PNW?
Yeah, I mean, as long as the models exist, it can be used for that specific case. So in our case, the models that we generated, as you can see, they were made in different tools, but they were made with this very specific region. But if there's already a model of another region, and as long as we kind of communicate and putting together the guidelines to integrate that kind of model for another region, they can use the same interface. So just to summarize, the interface and the workflow that you saw is the same for any model that we put into the system. And the plan is to also bring in other visualizations in case that model needs something very specific.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? I see that Denny is typing an answer to the previous question as well. But I don't see any new questions. Oh, okay, let's see. James, you have your hand up?
I can't type into the QA, so I had to ask out loud. This is for Mike. There was a slide where you showed a real strong break in a time series of, I believe it was streamflow. And I was just curious if the QA process allows for automatic detection of shifts. It appeared to be a shift in, or a base shift of some kind in the stage or something. So I was curious if that's one of the things you've addressed in the
Yeah, that's something that would probably be flagged during the QA process as an anomaly, but there's no infrastructure for automatically addressing that. There is a built-in gap filler. So you could potentially flag the points near a shift like that as problematic, and it would fill in the space between with something reasonable. But honestly, a problem as egregious as the one that I showed there would probably have to be addressed prior to upload.
I see. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. That said, that would only affect a single day of your estimates. So you could also omit a day like that from the model, and the rest of your days would probably be estimated just fine.
10-4. Could I ask one more question if I have a moment?
Yeah, we don't have any other. Oh, yeah. And then we have one more question after you.
I'd be very short. Just for Luis, we were sharing. The thing we were excited about was the shareability, the deployability of the architecture we're playing with. Is your set of containers and so forth, is that also terraformed? Is that something that we could explore and look at on the back end?
Right. So everything on the back end, or at least most of the services, are all Dockerized, right? So they can be deployed into using Kubernetes or whatever other infrastructure you have to use containers. So that's all good. What was the other part of the question?
Oh, that was it.
Yes, So that's pretty much it, right? We're trying to containerize all of the application, and we're also we're going to be moving on to also containerize the interface itself, which is going to be fun.
Yes. All right. Cool. Well, we'd love to talk to you about that as you go. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, no problem.
This one is for Mike and Louise. Is the idea still applicable even by the integration of conceptual hydrological models?
Is it possible that's for James and Louise?
Can they elaborate? What idea is it still applicable?
Yeah, if we.
I think the question is with respect to conceptual models rather than if the asker, the questioner, wants to just confirm that we're heading the right direction. It's conceptual models versus more physically based models, and my assumption is that the answer is yes, because it's just a matter of whether it's got inputs and outputs, and so it could be plugged in. Luis, if I misstate, then.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the idea of a conceptual model is that it does eventually become the model itself, right? But that's where you part from.
James, you have another question?
No, I asked my. I could ask questions forever, but no, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, we have no open questions. We have a few minutes remaining if anyone wants to throw another question in the chat, or if any of the speakers have questions for each other. All right, so it's looking like I didn't want to cut anyone off if they were typing their question in the chat, but it's looking pretty quiet. So yeah, that will conclude. Oh, wait, we have another one. Okay. Hi, I am new to HydroShare. Could you explain a little bit about how it works? So that question, so to confirm that do you mean the integration of Luis's tool with HydroShare, or HydroShare as a data repository in and of itself?
I can answer very briefly, and anybody that's more familiar from CUAHSI can correct me. The HydroShare platform allows you to store data. It's got a whole bunch of integrations on the back end that allow it to distinguish different types of data. For instance, if you upload NetCDF data, it will allow you to share those via thread server automatically. It will also, as you saw from Luis's presentation, allow for integration of actual applications. It has some compute capability attached to the back end. There's a Jupyter Hub platform similar to the one that we presented, and it's all tied, if you make resources public, to the idea of sort of a DOI where each resource is given a unique identifier that can always be found and referred to as a data set, sort of for publication purposes or that kind of thing.
Yeah, so if you want a full tutorial on how to use HydroShare, I offer those. If you email help@CUAHSI.org, I'm on the back end, I'm the other end of that. And if you want just a full tutorial of how to use HydroShare, I can actually set up a time to fully go through that with you. It's my job, so I'm happy to do that. But like James said, in general, HydroShare is a file agnostic data repository with a high level of access control that offers publication and DOIs for data. But we have another one for Denny, but feel free to reach out to help@CUAHSI.org if you want to talk more about it. For Denny, how would you see using an end budget approach in your stack of data?
Yeah, that's a great application for the data pipeline. And just so people are clear, an end budget approach of looking at inputs versus outputs of nitrogen. And I think that by integrating time series as spatially of paired deposition inputs of nitrogen and watershed exports of nitrogen, you could get a really accurate estimate of how those budgets are changing over time, seasonally, across space. We also have lots of different gradients of land use and seasonality as well. So incorporating that with the precipitation phase could be super powerful, considering that the type of nitrogen coming into your system is also going to be dependent on your precipitation phase. So this type of functionality, I'm planning on creating functions that users could calculate annual or seasonal inputs and exports of nitrogen within the data pipeline to get at some of these more basic applications.
Awesome. So we're at time. And I want to thank all of our wonderful presenters and also everyone who asked questions in the chat. I feel like we had some really great discussion, and we saw some really great presentations today. So this will be, I don't know if Julia wants to take over and give this will be posted on YouTube talk, but this will be available on YouTube to rewatch as well. And it'll be on the CUAHSI YouTube channel. Julia, do you have any closing remarks?
Nope, you covered it. Thank you again to all of our speakers and for all of our attendees for joining us today. And we'll see you next week. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.